Where should I start? So I'm conscious that we're sort of at the end of the day, so I'll be fairly brief. And I guess most of the conversations I've heard since I've been here, I only arrived in the middle of the day, were really about the investment back in the local infrastructure and making sure that we're healthy and we're warm and all those sorts of things. And I guess the people that you're keeping healthy and warm are the people that we employ in our company, send all around the world to earn export dollars to reinvest back into the community here. And that's really, I guess, particularly in the ICT sector, which has been very vibrant in Christchurch for many, many years. There's actually a lot of activity going on at the moment, and I think an inspirational group of entrepreneurs and business people who could have very easily picked up, because of the sort of transient nature, I guess, of software businesses and ICT, and gone to another city, but didn't, but stayed and built the Epic Centre, and really at the moment you're seeing, I think, a new generation of entrepreneurs in the Christchurch community come through. So thanks for the introduction, but the reality is, I mean, I work with 300 odd people who are really the successful people, and I just get an opportunity to come and talk about what they do. But why this might be a little bit interesting is a whole bunch of things coincided for our business around the time of the earthquake. There was a global financial crisis on at the time, and when you're in the export industry, that makes things very difficult. The currency was in a pretty challenging situation and still is, and so for exporters like us, who 80% of our money comes from overseas, that continues to provide some challenges. In our particular case, as a software company, and most of you have heard the name Jade Software around town, which we're a spin out of Jade, we were in kind of every currency, every vertical market, every country that you would not want to be in, and then along comes an earthquake just to really challenge the culture and the people that work for us. But what it did was it really consolidated our organisation, and the people that showed up to work every day almost had a renewed spirit of we need to make this work for Christchurch going forward. And the product of that time, I'm not sure that we would have been able to do what we've done if the people hadn't really got together at that point in time and said, we've got our own challenges at home, but we really need to keep the wheels turning. So when we're sort of talking about the investment that's going on in Christchurch at the moment, and thinking about maybe the next 10 years of significant capital investment that's going to come into Christchurch, I guess my kind of cue there would be, at the end of that 10 years, what's left? We'll have a great city, I'm sure, and it'll be a fantastic population. But export businesses like ours and like the others that are operate out of Christchurch are absolutely critical that they continue to grow and invest and be in this city. So one of the things that I'll start with very briefly is, as a business at this point in time when the earthquakes happened here, we were irrelevant almost to our export markets. We'd been through a period of sort of underinvestment in our products. We'd been through a period of probably doing the same thing as we'd done for many, many years. So we found ourselves in rather a challenging situation, as I said, global financial crisis. But what it did do was provide some options for us. We could either kind of react to that and hunker down, particularly as we went through the first 12 months after the earthquake. We could respond, I guess, by making changes in our business to get through that. But what the people in the business did here in Christchurch was really initiate a substantial amount of change through that period and find new ways to do things. I guess with that sort of platform that we had for change, then we took, I think, a fairly aggressive action in terms of reshaping part of our company, and the product of it was this company called Wynard, which we spun out about 8 months ago. We've been operating about a year, but we formally spun it out about 8 months ago. And the business that we're now in, I think, is kind of fairly interesting from a Christchurch point of view, because it's probably the business you'd least likely to find in a city like this. So Wynard is actually based here in Christchurch. We've got about 85 people here. There's about 140 of us globally. But basically we're an organisation, a software organisation that's established globally, and we focus on protecting companies and countries from threat, crime and corruption. So in a nice peaceful place like Christchurch, what do we know about that? Well, interestingly, we've got some pretty smart people that live here that know a lot about where it's going to, as opposed to maybe what you'd think about the sort of traditional threats that probably New Zealand doesn't face. What we've built is a group of software and tools that are very efficient at protecting vulnerable entities, be they people, be they companies, be they borders. And I sort of put this quote in here for a reason. So my presentation might have been a little bit irrelevant, other than Jerry's just had a hammering in question time over the last day about fraud and corruption in Christchurch, particularly around contractors and things like that. So this is going to become, this idea of organised crime, or these problems with organised crime, is going to become an increasing problem here in Christchurch. I mean, you'd have to be silly to think that amount of money in the system that some innovative criminals are not going to figure out how they penetrate that. So I think there's kind of a lesson here that the criminal activities are very very fluid, very able to adapt, and you have to believe that everybody's sort of got their eye on Christchurch at the moment around how they can be part of that. But we basically have 4 products. They're all built here in Christchurch. They focus on the areas of risk management and threat assessment for some of the world's largest infrastructure assets, airports, Dubai Airport, airports here in New Zealand, ports in Australia. We have an intelligence product that's running the largest crime and corruption inquiry in Europe at the moment. Over 300 odd million documents that are being processed by that intelligence agency. We have a digital forensics product that was built by New Zealand Police that's now being managed out of here. Again, is being used all around the world in various police forces and agencies. We have an investigations platform that's used for complex crime and discovering, I guess, criminal activity. They're really interesting products, but what is quite unique is 2 of those 4 products have been brought to market since the earthquake at a period where people are dealing with a lot of challenges at home. And they've done it with such sort of passion and innovation that it's pretty hard not to get excited about the team that's built it, the fact that it's come out of Christchurch this time, and I guess the creativity that's alive and vibrant here in Christchurch. So what do we do? Well, basically, we have offices now in Auckland, Sydney, Dubai, London, Toronto, and we're just opening in Washington, DC. But all of it is really based out of the Crime Science Research Centre we've got here, which shares a building with Jade. And what we're particularly focused on are areas of, as I say, crime science, so not criminology, but crime science. We're really looking at around data, around predicting crime, about understanding it and disrupting it. So not so much criminals, but the actual science around crime. So the sorts of things that we're talking about for engineers, well, we're all in the market for engineers and mathematicians and scientists at the moment, not only to rebuild places like Christchurch, but the sorts of people that do this sort of work have lots of letters before and after their name. They're very well paid. The average salary we're paying here in Christchurch at the moment is a little bit over $120,000, which is not bad money if you're a 3rd or 4th year graduate. And that continues to grow in terms of the capability that we need to come out of the university here around smart people that we need to keep in the city. So the areas where we're playing, we're just moving into predictive policing. We're in the areas of fraud detection, cybercrime. We're doing everything from homicide investigations through to organised crime and corruption. And we're doing it in all these sorts of places. But I think the kind of important message is this is a great local business of people that stayed and have invested in the company in terms of their time, effort and creativity to make sure that there's a business here that's going to be really interesting for the younger generation to come. So what does it look like? Well, I've got a very brief video that will give you a sense of what we do.
The world is constantly changing, and so are the challenges we face. There are risks we know. There are events we need to understand. And there are new threats we haven't yet imagined. Assessing threats, managing risks, exploiting intelligence, countering crime, investigating events, and enforcing laws requires powerful tools. Wynard Group is specialists in intelligence-led risk management, helping protect the world's most essential services in government, financial services, and critical infrastructure. Driven by problems that continue to grow in scale, complexity, and impact. Designing unique solutions that connect risk management, intelligence, and investigation processes together, arming you with the most powerful tools possible to achieve the strongest result, whatever the situation.
So that's sort of our story, but I think there's probably a more important story, or maybe a message that I'd sort of like to get across. One of the things I think from a New Zealand point of view that we are going through at the moment is what are the platforms that New Zealand's going to play on going forward from an economic growth and innovation perspective. And so I think you'll see a lot of talk at the moment when you've got companies like Xero in the market at the moment. They're actually worth more than Air New Zealand as of today. I think they've got about 400 staff. Versus the sort of infrastructure that's behind large companies like Air New Zealand, then you start to think quite differently about how cities like Christchurch might continue to innovate going forward. This is something that's not public yet, but I'll sort of share it. I think that we're going to launch it on about the 19th of May, but there's a security alliance that's come together, and the interesting thing is of the 4 key companies that are in there, all of them have a presence here in Christchurch. So our company we've just talked about, Endace, do some manufacturing here. They're a technology company that specialise in the areas of cybersecurity. Tate, I'm sure you all know, around critical communications, and Gallagher even do quite a bit here in terms of manufacturing. So you've got 4 companies that are actually reasonably well known and have been in New Zealand for many, many years and grown here, that have now got together to form a security alliance to make sure that together as an industry we enter particularly the export markets in the US and make the most of both, I guess, Christchurch, but also working together in those markets. And then helping that has been the government agencies that have backed this alliance. And then thirdly, I guess, or fourthly, the trade arm, New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. But I guess the thing I'd kind of point out is we're now sort of, as an industry, interested in how do we push back into the tertiary education, the secondary education system, and Christchurch is a fundamental part of that. It obviously has one of the best engineering schools in the country at Canterbury, incredibly valuable asset, and so we're very focused on how does an industry like ours now make sure that the university here in Canterbury has a very healthy future and that we attract the right candidates because we are absolutely dependent on a flow of top quality students coming out of that institution. So I guess sort of in summarising, I guess the key message here is, I don't actually live in Christchurch. I did during the period, but I spend most of my time out of the country at the moment. But what I noticed coming back here is there's such passion and influence and focus on the rebuild. And the one thing I would say is we have to be really conscious at the end of the 10-year period that we've created a city that's relevant, that's compelling and really desirable for, I think, the innovative businesses that want to be here. And I'm really impressed with what's going on because you do notice that the entrepreneurs, particularly in the city, have got together and made sure that entrepreneurial spirit that I think, particularly in this sector, has made Christchurch quite special, has survived and continues to grow. So thank you for your time.